Okay, so Amanda, just give us a little bit of background about what led you to become the MD of Cytoplan.
I've been here 15 years. I met one of the directors 15 years ago when I was working for another pet food company, in fact, and that was working in nutritional capacity. And I was so impressed with the supplements that they were offering, the uniqueness of Food State, that I beat a path to the door and asked if I could join them. We worked a little bit with the nutrients in pet food, and the results were so impressive, I suddenly thought this is something I need to work with humans.
Because you actually got a homeopathic background as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I started off in homeopathy. And again, this is another reason that led me to nutrition, because very often homeopaths are noticing today that the very well chosen homeopathic remedy isn't curative, it's only palliative. And one of the main reasons for that is that people's bodies aren't able to respond to the remedy in the same way as they were many, many moons ago, when the nutritional status and the fundamental structures of the body were slightly different, and that's all basically because the building blocks aren't there.
Yeah, do you want to just talk about those building blocks?
The building blocks of health, well, our body is made up entirely of minerals. If we're short of those in any capacity, we will not be at optimal function. And
that optimal function, I don't think people really even know what that means nowadays.
No, many people don't really know what it's like to be truly healthy. But it's not just health as you perceive it in an acute situation on a daily basis. It's also protection, and the first place that minerals will be used is in acute needs. Secondarily, they will be put into the protective capacity of the body. If we're in short supply, the acute needs will always be met because that's a law of survival. The thing that will go by the way is the protective capacity, and that's what we're seeing today. People who are very, very much more susceptible to illness. Illnesses are now occurring in younger people, and these are illnesses that were only previously seen in the elderly, and this is all because the protective factors aren't there, because the nutrients are short in the food chain and in the diets.
Yeah, and I don't think people realise when they're making a food choice how nutrient depleted the food is that they're actually choosing.
People couldn't possibly realise. Older people today make the observation, the food doesn't taste today like it did 30, 40 years ago. And that's quite interesting because the nutrients in food are very much retained in the flavouring, or contained and retained in the flavouring. So carrots that don't taste as good are, by virtue of the fact that they probably have a lot less beta-carotene than they had many years ago. So that's sort of an interesting, noticeable factor of it.
I think that's really fascinating because I work with a chiropractor, and she deals with animals and she deals with them with herbs, and they're still able to intuitively select the herbs that will heal them.
I know, yeah. I notice this with horses and cows grazing. They will pick at what they need.
And I think that's genuinely lost with ourselves.
Yeah, I think we've just moved away from our instinctive instinct. We don't need it so much now to survive. I mean, I've taken food into my house if I was going to cook for myself, and my cats turned their nose up at it. So I'd say they know better than I do, and their instinct's better than mine.
And do you think our instincts are being depleted very much because our nutrients are depleted?
Oh, I haven't thought of it in that respect. I think we just don't need the instinct of being able to sniff out food to survive, so probably it's just something that's an adaptive process that's gone over the years since food's been so abundant.
And I think it's interesting because the abundance of food has come about because of our farming methods. How do you feel that that's led to this nutritional gap?
Yeah, there's three reasons for that. One is that we use different fertilisers now. Farmers only use nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus, which is a fertiliser that will allow plants to grow, but it doesn't give them all they need for health. Growing plants will take up all the minerals in the soil in excess of 36, but all they need for actual or to manifest growth are nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. So those are the only ones that are fed to the soil. The plants are grown, they're taken away from the soil. in bygone years, plants were grown, and every other year they were actually allowed to die off and go back into the soil to replenish the soil with minerals. Another factor in it is that in bygone years we used to plough quite lightly. Now we do deep ploughing, and that affects what are called mycorrhiza, which is a fungus in the soil. The purpose of this fungus is to biotransform inorganic minerals into an organic form that they can be taken up by growing plants. The mycorrhiza is now destroyed by the deep ploughing, and that means a lot of the minerals are in the soil, but they're not available for the plants to take them up. So there's a lot of knock-on effects, which means that the food that's grown today is, on average, 60% depleted in minerals compared with the same food 60, 100 years ago.
That's just an astonishing difference, because that means, in effect, that we need to be eating that much more to be getting that amount of nutrients in.
Well, our physiology evolved when we were hunter-gatherers. At that time, we were active beings. We needed to consume about 4,000 calories a day. Our physiology still needs the same micronutrient content. What we don't need today with our very much more lax lifestyles is the same macronutrient content, the calorie content.
Yeah.
So that's another factor. We still need the micronutrients. Our diets are now, 1,500, 2,000 calories a day. We're actually getting half before we start with the fact that the food is depleted. We're probably ending up with about a quarter of what we actually need.
That's just incredible, really, when you think about Linus Pauling's quote, which was that, he felt you could trace every sickness and every disease and every ailment to a mineral deficiency.
And more research has been done on that now, and I think that is very, very much prevailing.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about the micronutrient over macronutrient, because one of the key things I work on with my clients is moving them away from the whole calorie fixation that they have to a nutrient fixation instead. I'm moving from one addiction to another. And because just explain the difference in that for my audience.
Well, micro and macro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did use it a little bit incorrectly. Micronutrients are nutrients in the body that are at the level of less than 5 grams. So they're things like chromium, selenium, all the things that if you look on the supplement label will say UG or MCG, micrograms, it's tiny amounts. The macronutrients, on the whole, are ones that are needed in larger amounts, calcium, magnesium. I use the term incorrectly because I use macro to mean protein, carbohydrates and fats, which is an even larger portion of what's contained in food.
And that's basically where people tend to focus on, though, isn't it? They tend to they'll look at a label, and unlike a supplement label, it doesn't label the minerals. It just basically says you've got this much protein, this much carbohydrate, this much fat, and therefore people are very rarely looking outside of that, which is why, people who are eating reduced fat products they've got no idea what they're doing to the body.
No, absolutely. There is now a growing market of fortified foods, but it's still very slow growing because still the medical profession believe we can get all we need from a well-chosen diet.
Yes, I was having a conversation about that today actually with somebody else, which was interesting, and about the fact that their doctor had actually said that they had only it was a day's worth of nutrition education.
During their training, yeah. That's right. That's all they get. So really they come to the front not really with a great knowledge or appreciation of the value and impact of nutrition on health.
And the person had said that actually they didn't need to know about nutrition because it wasn't actually going to affect their area of expertise they were going into, which was the gynecology area, which kind of amazed me, to be honest.
It is amazing. About 8 years ago, the government brought out a white paper called Choosing Health, where they identified how important nutrition was to health, and they were going to put in nutritional consultations in most general practitioners, and by virtue of funding, that fell by the wayside. So I think underneath there is an appreciation, but there's an inability to do anything about it.
Right. Okay, it's interesting. So what's the difference between Cytoplan products and a general supermarket product? Because I know that there's a massive difference, but I'd like to hear it from yourself, from my audience, because often they're choosing the most cheapest supplements?
Yes, we've always pioneered and held the philosophy that nutrients are best delivered to the body in the same form as they occur in food. Our food state and whole food products are, and I say in inverted commas, the only products on the market that produce and present nutrients in the same form as they occur in food. There are a few other people attempting to do a similar thing. They aren't the same as us, but it's nice to know that people are beginning to get hold of the message that that is the best way. It's a very simple law of nature. The different structures have different functions in the body. Most nutrients as they occur in nature are complex structures. Every single part of that complex structure is part of the metabolic pathway of that nutrient in the body and making sure it gets to where it's needed. The commonly sold supplements on the market are isolated because they've been made in a laboratory to mimic what's thought of as the active ingredient, and these are totally different structure. They hence have a different function in the body. They follow different metabolic pathways. They are not always useful at all. That's the fundamental difference. So our nutrients are in a food form. The body recognises them as food. They are gentle. They are bioeffective in very small doses. They always have a beneficial result.
And I find this with your supplements in particular. Your supplements are my main range that I carry, and I noticed that they're nowhere near as high as some of the other supplements I could buy, but actually the effects that I get can be absolutely profound from them.
Yeah. On average, our supplements are going to be 4 times more bioeffective than isolated nutrients. But what I would say is that, particularly with minerals that need amino acid carriers to take them to sites of need within the body, mineral supplements that are sold without an amino acid complex don't really stand much chance of getting to where they're needed.
And this is where everything works synergistically, isn't it? Because most people, I had someone not so long ago who was a friend, and they said to me they were taking zinc, and they were asking me some advice. And I don't like to give my friends advice in all honesty, but then they said they've been told by someone in their office that zinc would be useful, but actually what they were finding was that it wasn't really doing what they thought it would do. And that's because I know it works synergistically and everything has to be balanced out.
Yeah, well, what's the synergy that you're thinking of with that?
Well, I'm thinking that all of your... For me, it's about you need your diet in there, you need a range of vitamins and minerals, not just one to go in. You actually need everything to be really balanced, to be able to really function, to give you the high health, to bring you up to optimal health. Just one in isolation.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, the reality is if we're short of one nutrient, we're likely to be short of the whole range of nutrients, and that's what the data shows. Zinc, though, of course, would be a particularly interesting one because zinc will bind with, zinc in excess in the body will bind with other minerals, so it could, in that instance, have a depleting effect on other minerals as well.
And this is where, when someone's putting something in, often it will be taken away from other areas, like you're saying, and it can deplete. The body's a fascinating thing in that capacity because it just wants to bring itself back into balance all the time, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And of course, if you look at food doesn't contain single nutrients. It contains a whole complex of nutrients, and that's what our body's used to, how our body's used to receiving nutrients, and that's how we tend to design our products in the same way as they would be in food, with the same accompanying nutrients and on about the same levels as an optimum diet would give with food that was optimally mineralised and vitaminized.
Now, a lot of the research that comes out at times, which is very negative about supplementation, I find they're either not using optimal amounts or they're using synthetics. And is it not working because of that mimicking effect that you're saying?
It's quite interesting because if you look at all the research that's negative, what every single study concludes is that, for instance, vitamins A, C and E, because this is quite a big study, and selenium are not necessarily beneficial. In fact, they might be detrimental if given as supplements, but they are wholly beneficial when taken as food. And that's been an absolute consistent feature. And it's exactly that. Isolated vitamins and minerals do not do the same job as food nutrients in the body. It's that same basic principle, different structure, different function.
Now, I just find it absolutely fascinating, to be honest, around supplementation. Do you think it's absolutely necessary now for us to supplement?
I think it's a very, very good protective feature to adopt. If you look at all the data out there and talk to the people who really know, the scientists, the medical researchers, they are all taking supplements themselves. I think it's very difficult to get all you need for health from food alone. If you spent all day picking and choosing exactly what you were going to eat and where it came from, it might just about be possible, but you wouldn't have much time for anything else. It's a very simple thing to do. It's to take a supplement that is designed to bridge the nutrition gap. And the nutrition gap is the amount of nutrients the average person in the population is getting from a reasonable diet, the difference between that and the amount they need for optimal health. That's the nutrition gap. A supplement designed to fill that is wholly safe because it's way short of upper safe limits. It's also going to be wholly beneficial. It gives you that peace of mind to know that if your food, all your dietary choices may not be as they should be, you've still got that buffer of the supplement that will give you the protection you need.
Because lots of people now are taking supplements instead of actually looking at their diet and their lifestyle.
Yes, I wouldn't recommend that. I think food and diet have to come first because that's the most sustainable thing. And nothing will replace a good diet. You really won't, and one should never think it can do. But if you take a supplement that's in the same form as food, that will buffer you as well as anything can do, and it'll also make up for the shortfalls.
Really interesting, really interesting. Now, what would you consider to be the optimal diet?
Well, it's quite interesting because there's a lot of different research, a lot of different data. I think if one looks at it through an evolutionary lens, so to speak, the Paleolithic diet is probably the one that our physiology is best designed to work well on. And that is simply, it's protein, meat, fish, not large amounts because our ancestors wouldn't have had large amounts because they wouldn't have the availability of them. Vegetables, fruits, more vegetables than fruits. None of the dietary components that have been brought in the last 100 years. Grains weren't things our ancestors would have eaten, and we do know that most people, particularly unwell people, don't really do well on grains. Our physiology hasn't adapted to make use or good use of the foods that we've now got in abundance today. Sugar was in short supply. That's not something that we're designed to have all that we do well on. Dairy, minimally. We lose the ability to digest dairy after 18 months old. So dairy isn't something adults should be having just because simply we're not designed to digest it and do well on it. So I think it's taking it back to our original physiology, what we have evolved to need and be healthy on, and that's basically protein, small amounts, 2 to 4 ounces a day, meat and fish, vegetables and fruits. And even some of the vegetables we eat today, potatoes, because of their solanine content, is something that ancestral man wouldn't have eaten because some would have had them and died, and hence he would have been observed, this isn't a good thing. And that's another thing, if you move into today, a lot of people don't do well on potatoes. I don't know if you've noticed that at all.
Well, I find with so many people are so stressed now, they've got such heightened histamine levels within their system that they're often highly sensitive to a lot of things, and it's almost, I have to reduce the stress levels first so that I understand actually what is causing them a problem outside of the stress itself. So it's interesting for me on that factor, because people will show up highly sensitive to a lot of foods at first until we've managed the stress, and then we reduce it down. Go on.
I was going to say digestive enzymes aren't produced when people are stressed, and that's why people with things like that, irritable bowel disease, notice that it's a lot worse in times of stress.
you want to just go into the effects of stress in a bit more detail?
Ooh, they're multifactorial. Basically, from a digestive capacity, digestive enzymes won't be produced in times of stress because the same enzymes that support the immune system also support the digestive system. So if they're being used for other acute functions, acute needs in the body, they just won't be available for digestive function. And that's why people with irritable bowel disease and things find they get far worse fermentation and bloating simply because the food isn't digested when they're very stressed. So stress is a key factor for optimal digestion, optimal nutrient usage. And stress has so many other effects. A lot of it, the fat around the middle syndrome that you see today, that's another factor. High cortisol, which is a hormone that's produced during stress, which switches off adrenaline, and that causes this fat around the middle profile that we see. So really, we've got quite a stress nation, haven't we?
We have indeed, and I can't remember which professor it was actually who was doing the research for the government, was talking about they had a key issue and they were having to look at mental health and what they actually needed to do there. So it's obviously a massive factor, and I would say that the majority of the people who walk through my door, I'm dealing with their stress on top of all the other factors, because often you can't see what's going on until you reduce that.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. So first things first, you're just working through the layers.
Yeah, step by step by step. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting you talk about the paleo diet and the reduction in grains, because I believe, and obviously the research shows that the opiates in wheat and the opiates in dairy as well, often they're a couple of the biggest things that I really find it hard to kind of wean people off, because they're so addicted to them.
Yeah, and of course wheat wasn't part of our ancestral diet, which is why we're not adapted to it, because wheat and all grain crops have a lot of mycotoxins, things like aflatoxins, which would have killed us before the days that we could heat things up and destroy these toxins. So that's why they weren't part of the Paleolithic diet and why we're not adapted to do well on them.
And you talk about heating foods up. Do you advocate eating a raw food diet or high raw food diet or cooked diet in any way?
I think if people can and they like it, obviously that's going to be the best thing. The paleo diet actually says you can eat anything that can be eaten raw. You don't necessarily need to eat it raw, but the food should be capable of being eaten raw. So that's how you can ascertain when you look at things whether they can be part of the paleo diet or not. I think what's important not to do is to suddenly make changes, because the digestive flora adapt quite slowly to the foods that you eat on a daily basis. So that if you go from raw to cooked, you're not going to have the same flora there that will digest one and the other. So if you suddenly change, you're going to get digestive disturbance. So it's quite important to have a wide variety of things that suit you and to maintain that same sort of dietary profile. I think it's very much what one's actually been brought up on and what one's done well on. If people are doing well, don't fix what's not broke, as long as the basic contents are okay. Obviously raw food is better because it's food that contains enzymes, it contains amino acids, it contains things that could be denatured by cooking. So you'll certainly get the best outcome. Although just saying that, I was thinking things like tomatoes actually are better cooked because you get the lycopene component out of those better if they're cooked with an oil. So maybe it's horses for courses.
Yes, and I think it's where I'll come back to the animals again, where we start to be more intuitive with what's working for us. Most people are just override that, I find.
Yeah, I think when you're unwell, you crave all the things that are bad for you, but once you can turn that around, your body begins to recognise what it needs at any point in time and what's good for you.
And I totally agree with that. And you also say that if your body has the ability to heal itself.
Only the body can heal itself. No one else can heal it.
Thank you very much. Every single week I bang on about that. Now, you talked about digestive flora there. Do you want to just go into that in a bit more detail for my audience in case they're not clear about what you're actually referring to?
Yeah, these are things called probiotic strains, which you've probably seen on the labels of products. They are bacteria that are native inhabitants of our digestive tract, multifunctional. Their prime purpose is to digest food. They also help in the synthesis of B vitamins. They also help support the immune system. They also help support vitamin K. So they've got multiple activity. We have millions and millions in our body. But I'll tell you what, one of the most widespread problems from the population is a condition called dysbiosis, which is means difficult biotic function. So basically that manifests as too few probiotic strains, or ones that aren't naturally native to our digestive tract. And this will happen after antibiotics, where very often pathogens will prevail where the probiotic ones have been killed off.
And so antibiotics are having quite a detrimental effect, effectively, on our guts.
Okay, sometimes antibiotics have a purpose, and I'm not going to knock them, because that would be totally wrong. I think on the whole they're a little bit overprescribed, but I guess it's not really for me to comment on that. What happens when you have antibiotics is they kill off all the flora throughout the gut, the bad ones and the good ones. But what then happens is the bad will come back like candida a lot more quickly than the good will. So that's why it's quite important post-antibiotics to take a probiotic supplement. And prebiotics. Prebiotics are food for our native strain of probiotics containing root vegetables, mainly root vegetables in fact, and these will help replenish our native friendly bacteria as quickly as possible. If you've got a healthy population of native friendly bacteria, they will exclude the growth and replication of pathogens because they have priority of dominance throughout the GI tract.
So they're incredibly important for our immunity.
They are the fundamental building blocks of life and health. Poor health starts in the gut, and that was a philosophy that Hippocrates pioneered, and it's absolutely right.
Absolutely. I love that. Right. Now you talk about the hidden hunger, and that 1 in 3 of us are affected. Is that the nutrient gap?
It's absolutely the nutritional gap, yes. Hidden hunger. It's a hunger. It's quite interesting because if people are nutrient replete, they're a lot less hungry than those people who are nutrient depleted. And this is probably again an ancestral mechanism that made animals and people forage for food when they needed nutrients. So very often people can eat a lot of food and still feel hungry, and part of the driver for that is that they haven't had the nutrients that their body needs for satiety, or for the satiety mechanism to switch off.
It's absolutely fascinating because I've lived a raw food diet for over 10 years now, and high raw food diet, high optimal superfoods and nutrients and the best supplements I can afford. And I find that I eat so little, I eat 1 meal a day now. And if you told me 15 years ago where I ate all day, that I would be down to 1 meal a day, which was very green based, I'd have never believed myself.
No, this is why it's called hidden hunger, because it's a hunger for something you don't know, but in fact it is a hunger for nutrients, probably minerals. Do you notice that horses will go and lick the ground, cows will as well? That's looking for minerals.
Oh, right, that's really interesting, because I do know that my animals will go off in search of specific greens, and they'll only eat specific ones, and that fascinates me.
Yeah, they know, don't they? Very clever.
Now, the catalogue, I noticed, said 7 out of 10 children thought potatoes grew on trees, which...
It's frightening, but children aren't brought up with the knowledge of food that... I don't know how old you are, and I won't ask you on air, but sort of certainly from my generation, when food was grown in the garden, it was cooked in the house, and everyone helped prepare the food. It's not like that today. Food comes out of packets, it comes out of McDonald's, it comes off supermarket shelves, and I don't think they think much more about it than that. And that's a shame. It's such a fundamental part of our lives and our health.
That's absolutely key at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the rock on which everything stands, because without it we'd be a bit lost.
To say the least. Now, and also the average amount that people eat isn't the 5 a day which the government has as its food pyramid, but actually 2.8.
It's less than that. The mean average across the population is 1.8 portions. This is really interesting because every portion of our fruit and veg, and this is assuming 5 a day, gives us 20%. Each portion gives 20% of our protective nutrients. Each portion that we don't have means that we're 20% less protective nutrients. If we're having 1.8 portions instead of 5 portions, you can see how hugely depleted people are in the essential nutrients they need for health. Fruit and veg contains all our protective nutrients, the flavonoids, the carotenoids, the minerals. It's not contained in the other small part of the diet we eat. That's worrying, isn't it? The young, there are groups of young people between 16 and 24 who don't eat any fruit and veg on a daily basis.
Well, I have clients who don't, and I have even some of my healthiest clients are not eating 2.8 a day, and it's really quite scary when you think about it. I've never actually thought about it as 20%.
Yeah, if you go back to the Victorian era, they were eating 10 plus portions of fruit and veg a day. There was a nil incidence, or nearly nil, of the chronic degenerative diseases that are so manifest today. Cancers, coronary artery disease, dementias, all those things that are based on nutritional shortfalls or caused by were not prevalent then, and their diet was 10 portions plus of fruit and veg a day. We ought to be eating more, but where most people aren't even eating 5, I think the government pitching it at 5 was just a realistic starting place.
And it's really interesting that you said 10 plus. I'm glad you kind of gave an amount there about what people were eating originally, because I actually have, one of my diet plans has between 9 and 12, and most people absolutely bulk when they look at that. And I don't think that's a lot, because I do juicing and smoothies and all the other bits and pieces, so I can hide a lot of vegetables, a lot of greens. But actually, when you think about it, they were eating 10 plus a day and they thought nothing of that.
Absolutely. Of course, it's low calorie. Just to ask you a question, are you wonderfully healthy? Because it sounds as if you should be.
Unlike everybody, it doesn't just get better and better and better. You all have your health challenges, and but I'm pretty fit. I'm pretty slim, and I walk my talk basically.
That's the most important thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So would you advocate then, from your perspective, 10 plus a day?
Yeah, I think it's important to give people a realistic benchmark to start with, because if you say 10 plus a day and they're not eating any, they'll think, cool, can't manage that and it'll never begin. Yeah. So I think it's important to say, start where you can. Any portion you're having is going to give you that extra 20% of benefit, and then build up. But yeah, certainly probably 8 to 10 would be absolutely optimal and perfect. You're not going to go wrong by doing it, are you?
Not really, no. So, just to round up, if you were to give 3 key pieces of advice that someone could go away and do in my audience, what would they be?
Well, certainly I think fruit and veg a day, 5 plus portions of fruit and veg a day. The other thing we haven't touched on, which I think is fundamental to health, is exercise. Our physiology is designed for us to be active. All our antioxidant enzyme systems are upregulated through exercise. That is a very, very important feature. And however well you eat, if you don't exercise, you will never be truly healthy. So I have to bring that into the mix. The third thing I would say to most people is take a well-designed supplement to bridge the nutrition gap. And then if you're not doing perfectly with your diet, you will at least be protected.
Fantastic. So do you just want to give Cytoplan a bit of a plug? Tell us how we find you, the website, the phone number.
My name's Amanda. I'm always happy to talk to anyone or receive any emails. I'm amanda@cytoplan.co.uk. Our telephone number is 01684 310099, and the website www.cytoplan.co.uk. Thank you.
And this is, I'm just going to endorse these products because I use them, I get massive results with them, and I would say you're better off spending more money and having less than buying your synthetic products from the supermarkets, which are cheap. but they do not do the same thing.